Velkommen til podcastserien og online-programmet Mere Sjæl i familien. Jeg hedder Gitte Vinter Gravgaard, og jeg er forfatter til bogen Hjertebroen, Lær dit barn at føle sig forbundet. I den bog møder dit barn og du jeres sjæle og henter sjælen hjem. At skrive bogen har fået mig til at tænke meget over, hvad det vil sige at føle sig forbundet, og hvad sjælen er for en størrelse. Jeg tror, vi skal tale meget mere om sjælen. Derfor inviterer jeg nu en række eksperter, kollegaer, venner i studiet og spørger dem om, hvordan de opfatter deres sjæl og hvornår de føler sig mest forbundet. Hvis du har lyst til at være med og dykke længere ind i de her emner, så er du velkommen til at kigge på min hjemmeside hjertebroen.dk. Her finder du link til mit online-program Mere Sjæl i familien, hvor du får bogen Hjertebroen, får mere fra eksperterne og får en stund med din egen sjæl. Jeg håber du vil nyde den her episode. So today's interview is going to be in English, as I'm speaking to my dear friend and colleague, co-teacher and co-creator, Dr. Paul Luftenegger from Canada. Paul is a musical alchemist and a reverend and an interfaith minister. He writes and sings and composes conscious music to inspire global love and kindness from within. In so many ways, Paul is teaching me to reach and stretch when it comes to my own spirituality and understanding my heart and my soul. So I can't thank Paul enough for joining me in this interview about the Heart Bridge. So join me when Paul explains what it really means when we truly embrace our lives with our hearts and our souls and become all of the spectrums of our souls in manifest.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Gita.
I'm so happy you are here.
I'm so happy to be here. I feel very, very at home with you.
Yes, me too. I miss you. You're so far away.
Yes, I know. Canada to Denmark.
Too far away.
Far.
We'll try to bring us closer together in this interview.
Yeah, the bridge is always open with our hearts.
The bridge. The bridge. We are here to actually celebrate the Heart Bridge. So perfect introduction. I have written this little gem of a book and I can't wait to translate it for you to be able to read it, but you have heard a lot about it this past year. Yes. You are one of the people I have most soulful conversations with, and I can't thank you enough for having a friendship where it's possible to talk about everything that I am and everything that you are and everything that we are here to create on planet Earth. How amazing is that?
It's so amazing, and I feel the same way. And I know, we have circled around our lives together doing a lot of different things. So this is special too, I think. And congratulations on this. What number is this for you? What book?
This is the 8th in this sort of children's series, but the 14th overall.
Oh, congratulations. What a huge milestone.
Yeah, it is. It is. And in English, if we have international viewers on the video part of the podcast, it's the third book in the series Heartlight, and I've translated the first one into English. So this is the third one coming out in Danish. And Paul, you actually wrote the foreword to Heartlight in English.
I did. I know. And it was, it's when I think back to all of these years later, I remember reading your first book, The Children Meditations in My Heart. Like that really was the start of really me being introduced to your work properly. And then Heartlight, that is such a powerful reminder to anyone that when you hold that book, and then it bridges into what you're discussing today. And I love that I am a part of Heartlight, and anytime I look at the cover, it warms my heart.
Yeah, and I thought of you immediately when I saw the cover, because you are a little light bearer, big light bearer, but also see the boy in you. When you perform on stage with your music, then I often see the little boy in you. And when we did the covers and I put them together, I realized how they match, like your latest album and Heartlight, Spheres of Love and Heartlight, that they sort of they're like a team. They match, and I love that.
It's interesting with that song, with the songs on that album too. They go so well together, and it's interesting because it's also my eighth album too. So which is sort of an interesting. You're into that eight number
Yes.
Today, and with your new book.
Yes.
So I feel like there's sort of I don't know. There's bridging going on between all of these. I think connections and interbeingness that's happening. So
yeah. And one of the songs on Spheres of Love that I've listened to a lot this year, because this year has been all about rainbows to me. So writing the heart bridge is building a bridge of love from your heart, and the bridge is a rainbow bridge. And your track number 4 on Spheres of Love is called Rainbows Now. Can you tell me a little bit about Rainbows Now?
Yes, that song is so special to me for so many reasons. But when I was a child, one of my favorite things, and probably, this is where, life gets a little interesting when you look backwards at what your childhood was like. And my childhood was very specific and very focused on rainbows. And in particular, The Wizard of Oz with my granny was a very big connection to all of the music that I really loved as a child. And she used to sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow to me. And when I was a child, I also had visions of rainbows. So The Rainbow Connection was another song that I absolutely loved. Kermit the Frog sings that. I don't know if you know that one.
Mm.
And then the other one is I Can Sing a Rainbow is another song. So there's so many reminders of rainbows in my own childhood. And I feel that this album that you've just brought up in Rainbows Now, I feel like they've all come together to sort of bring together that song. And I had visions of what that was like. And when you really embrace your life with your heart and your soul, you, I believe, become all of the spectrums of your soul in manifest. So your highest self in manifest. And that is really what a rainbow represents in our humanity for me. So that song is very specific to, and I put it actually as that track number because of it being, if you look at the number, it being 4, and the 4th chakra is the heart. So I believe that the 4th chakra is the rainbow chakra that connects to source, or the beloved, that without a name, God, whatever the universe is a good way that people like to talk about that, or divine consciousness. So I feel that when your heart opens and you connect to our source, that you're able to sort of become that highest self and manifest with the rainbow of all that you are. So that's sort of how I see the rainbow.
I love it. And I after writing the heart bridge, and after going through the manuscript over and over again, I go to Skane where my parents have the house. You came there with me this September. That's where I write my books. And I remember walking with you on the beach just before you came. I was working on the manuscript, and you and Corey, your husband, you were walking with me on the beach, and I was asking you about this song because all of a sudden I had realized that what you sing about in Rainbows Now is sort of the outcome of what can happen if you read the heart bridge to your child. So you sort of, to me, sing about how it feels to be so deeply connected to your soul that you can sing rainbows now, and your soul can shine rainbows now. And that was just such a beautiful moment for me when I realized the connection between those two, like that song and the book. So that was just a beautiful moment.
Well, and in Skane, it's very interesting to me because it's the tip of Europe, as you've taught me and shown me on a map that we looked at actually in your kitchen. And I think it's very interesting to me when you start, like what you've just explained too with your heart. I believe that you can create and co-create your life with your heart. And when you live from your heart, you almost paint or create life in the way that your heart sees love. And, that includes relationships, that includes your quiet time with yourself. It includes how you see nature. It includes how you communicate with strangers. And you get to become the creator of your life consciously. And when you do that with love, or with the rainbow spectrum of the divine, goodness, you really are capable of doing miraculous things. So I think it's interesting how that song was sort of like, poignant to your book, and it is a bridge to the future, call it. Yeah.
I love it. Let me just ask you, what is the soul to you, Paul?
Well, this is the I don't even like to put $1 million question on it. It's probably the $1 trillion question, if not the gazillion-dollar question in the world. But for me, and I love the phrase "personally speaking for me." Everyone will have a different opinion or a different explanation of this, but personally speaking for me, where I'm at in this particular time of my life, the soul for me is the timeless part of you that is a piece of God. And I use the word God, but that doesn't leave out all of the other names of God. In many of the faiths there's 99 names of God, so God has many different names, and that even without a name. But for me, I also like the word source. But for me, the soul is a piece of God. And I believe that we all have this piece within us. And I always remember when I went to a retreat many, many years ago now, I was invited to the Brahma Kumari retreat. And I remember I was given a very big book of what they believe the soul is. They believe the soul sits right here. And I don't really feel like that's the only place the soul sits within me myself, but that's for me. But that's what they believe. And it opens up this idea of what is the soul to you, you as the person experiencing life. So for me, the soul is that part that is never capable of being wounded. It's the part, so I think our hearts can become wounded in life, but I believe the soul is that pure essence that is incapable of being wounded. It is always fresh. It is always vibrant. And when it leaves a body, there's no more life in the body. And it's almost like driving a car. There's no driver. The car really isn't capable of driving itself. And of course, these new cars can, but someone had to program it too. So for me, the body without the soul is lifeless. And once the soul leaves, the body is no longer filled with the soul.
Du lytter til podcasten eller ser videoen til programmet Mere Sjæl i familien. Jeg hedder Gitte Winther Gravgaard, og jeg er forfatter til Hjertebroen, Lær dit barn at føle sig forbundet. Med den bog og en række interviews ønsker jeg at inspirere til mange flere samtaler om sjælen og hvad det vil sige at føle sig forbundet. Hvor føler du dig mest forbundet? Hvornår? Og sammen med hvem? In today's interview, I talked to interfaith minister and musician Paul Luftenegger from Canada. Listen in as I ask him when he first as a child became aware of his soul.
Yeah, so the childhood's an interesting memory because we have different brain waves in the childhood, right? So when you start studying in science, I'm very intrigued by the way the brain waves are different for a child as they age. And Dr. Bruce Lipton has gone through that at great length, so I won't go through that today. But I think it's interesting because I believe that we sort of embody our life a little bit at a time. And I think as a child gets older, I feel like more of the soul fills the child. And it's very interesting to me, if you ever watch a baby look at what's going on around them, it's almost like they can see things that you can't see. And I'm very intrigued, or if they look at you, it's like they really see you in a way that, like, I feel like they're sort of seeing your soul. So it's sort of like there's no veil when you're a baby, and I'm fascinated by that. So for me, when I was a child, I feel like it's like I was incarnated, but I wasn't fully incarnated until I was probably around 7. So it was like it just kept getting more and more full. But I feel like by the time I was 7, I feel like I knew exactly what I was as the soul. Yeah.
And did you sort of have, like, in the heart bridge I describe, for me the soul is in the heart, like, so I think it fills the body, but for me the home of the soul is in the heart, which is what I write about in the heart bridge. And I explain it to the children as my little friend in my heart, the soul. So did you feel that you had like a companion, or like did you feel a relationship, like were you conscious of it, like as a friend or somebody to?
Absolutely. I was gonna say, so the biggest thing when I was a child, so I was born and raised Catholic, so I was very involved in Christian sort of teachings and Christian experiences as a child. And our first communion is when you're around 7 years old in grade 2 in our North American system. And I remember all of those sort of things leading up to that. And so for my experience, I experienced my first death actually when I was around like 7 years old. And that was the first time, and it was someone that I knew. It was a priest actually who passed away. And it was where the identity of the soul became known. And I used to have a relationship with God, very specifically, a very personal relationship with God for as long as I can remember. And I would speak to God and God would speak to me. And it was this back and forth of exchanging, of understanding. And when I looked at certain people, I could see lights and auras around them. And I didn't really, it was just sort of the way that I saw things when I was a child. So my relationship was very much angelic as a child, in the sense that I could see through almost people's masks, if that makes sense. And I know the person that really identified this for me the most, and I could see the most of their soul, was actually this man that passed away. And his name was Father Leboeuf. And he was such a kind man. And he was only 50. I believe he's only 52 years old when he died, but I thought he was so much older because he had white hair. But I remember whenever I look back at him in my memory, I always just see white light around him.
Wow.
And I think that this was probably my first experience where I really understood that there was a metaphysical aspect to life. And I couldn't identify or maybe define that until a much later space of my life, because it was just normal to me. But I recognized the older I got, it wasn't normal for most people.
No. And so we've talked about this before. I was also very connected as a child. And for me, I've often been asked in interviews how it feels to be connected, like how it felt to be connected as a child. And my only answer is I couldn't even begin to think how it would feel not to be it, because
Right.
I've not.
Your normal. Yes.
Yeah. And so one of the ambitions or hopes with the Heart Bridge is to also talk about feeling connected. So the soul part of the book is one thing, and the other thing is feeling connected to nature, to friends, to family, to God, to angels. How would you describe that connection you had as a child? How did that make you feel?
So it's sort of I have sort of a different, when I look back to my life now, so I'm going to just sort of fast forward in some of, so when I look at my childhood now, I look at sort of like when I was in my mother's womb for those 9 months, but I also look beyond that. So I sort of include all of it right up until probably being around 18 years old. So that's really my childhood in my mind. It's become one for me now. So there's different parts of it. But when I was younger, I started to be very interested in metaphysics from the perspective of a psychic spectrum. So I would have these awarenesses, but what's interesting about the Catholic religion is that they very much spoke poorly about, the psyche or the psychic aspect. But what I recognized sort of very early on is that it didn't make sense to what they were telling me. So what I was is I was very much inquisitive and very much, I needed answers. So I had a lot of questions that the Catholic side of things couldn't answer. So I went seeking it myself, probably from the time I was about 9 years old. And I was very interested. I used to read books from psychics when I was very young. And it was about the other side, what's on the other side. That was a book that I remember reading from Sylvia Browne is her name, and she was on Montel Williams' talk show. And that was a very big opener for me in my teenage years to sort of this other thing that wasn't being told to me in my Catholic teaching. So I remember being connected through the veil with God, with Source, and I wanted to sort of investigate what that meant. And I was a little scared of it, to be honest, at that time, because it was so demonized from the Catholic side or the Christian side of things. And when I look back at it now, it was so innocent and so beautiful and so effortless. But my soul was, I feel like I came to Earth to sort of serve the planet with my soul, with God, for things that have never been done before. So that's sort of how I look at that whole chunk of my life is sort of an investigation of this planet.
I want to talk to you more about, because you have recently become an interfaith minister. I want to dive into that a little later in the second part of this interview, because I also want to make sure that we talk about your music and you as a creator of music, and you sing a lot about the soul on your 8 albums and many different songs. Do you also, like, how is the soul part of how you create your music?
Yeah, so this is where things get interesting. So I feel like as you get older, if you're not careful, you edge God out. So Dr. Wayne Dyer spoke of this very beautifully and elegantly, but he used to say that the ego is edging God out. So I feel like what happens in life, it goes like this, is that you basically shut down that operating system because the world doesn't really honor it. So I did a lot of that probably from my 18 years throughout, probably about the time I was about 33, 34 years old. And I had sort of, I wouldn't say that I had lost God, but I felt like I was just in a different space of just like, surviving and also living and figuring out my human side, which wasn't at all about the soul or God really all that much. And then I experienced my father's death. And another death opened me up again. So that first death, the father LeBoeuf that passed away, and then the second really big death was my dad passing away. And my dad was 56 years old, so quite young. And then music entered my life again after a very long hiatus from music. And so what happened with me is I started to connect to God all over again. And all of those 18 years, I did a life review, and all of those 18 years, and God showed me through my grief actually kind of what happened in my life. And then I started to write music about it and share it with the world as asked by God to do so. So my interfaith part of it came from my music. And I feel my whole life up until 34 had to be the way it was to sort of become who I was becoming. And that's my dharma and my destiny. And that's where things get kind of interesting in life, because then you start serving the world instead of just yourself. So that's really, my music opened up that. So your question, I think if you could ask that again from that, what was your question from that?
Well, I think it's so, there is so much soul in all that you do. So it's both how the soul interact with you as you write your music, how your soul helps you write music. It's also when you perform your music on stage.
Yes.
Your soul is very present when you're on stage. And then you also bring out the soul in all of us who listen to you. And you help us heal, help our souls help us heal. So it's a hard question to ask you, because you have so much soul around you. But as a creative writer, as a singer, musician, piano player, and all of these things, when you sit down to write a new album, or how does it work? Like, is it your soul telling you what to do, or how does it work for you?
So here's where things get kind of interesting. So I think actually life is very simple. I think that a lot of people complicate things in this world. So I think it's really simple. We have an organic, sacred technology. We have a heart, we have a soul, and I believe that you can bring your soul into your body basically a lot more powerfully than we've been taught. So my spiritual practice is really bringing, God or source into me. So this is the way I meditate. A lot of people meditate from the inside of them out. I don't do that. I meditate, I go to God and I bring God into me. So anything that I do, that's how everything begins. When I write, when I create, I always bring God into me, or source into me, or the universe into me. But I say God, the omniscient, omnipresent, omni-beautiful, divine consciousness of pure love. And I bring that into me, and I fill my body up with it, and I fill my entire being up with it. And I feel when you do that, you become your highest self and manifest, which is basically your soul. So everything that I do is from that operating system. And I really believe that we're at a time where we have to do that more than ever, because the world is in so much discord. And when we fill ourselves up with that vibration or frequency, we have this whole operating system that opens. And music is a vibration. So it's the one thing inside of me that can get into the inside of another human being because of their sacred technology. And then something happens and there's a bridge of oneness. Sovereign, yes, but together we become one. And this is where I'm really interested in this conversation, because your book is called, really ultimately the reminder of the soul bridge. And when we bridge with each other in the sacred technologies, what happens is we become this whole different world. And what happens when all of us, when we honor the fact that we are very much the same in the sense that we are made of love, or we are made of soul, then, you and I work together in this field. So what we see, some people don't understand that there's two worlds going on. There's the world of fear, hate, greed, all that stuff that's horrible human stuff. But there's also another world. And when you become this conscious creator, this whole other world starts to show up for you. And it's a world that you won't find unless you operate with that system.
No.
So I'm very interested to see where this book takes you when you're talking about what this is now in the bridging of it. So I think as a creator, you and I witness this bridging so often in our work. But if you work in a bank, I don't know if you really see that. I don't know if you really see that in the world, or maybe you see little glimmers of it, human kindness. But I think ultimately, this whole new world is where we're able to talk about the soul and who are we, why are we here, where do we come from, what is this planet about, and where are we going? Interested in all of those questions.
Me too, and I can't wait to explore more of these questions with you in the second part of this interview. We will break this down here, and the first part is ready for you in podcast, and the second part is in my program, More Soul in the Family. You're welcome to come with us and continue the conversation. Thank you for this first part, Paul.
Yes, thank you so much, Gita and everyone.
Du har lyttet til podcasten Mere Sjæl i familien med Paul Luftenegger, musik af Troels Hammer, og jeg hedder Gitte Winther Gravgaard.